Good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Whatever you hear this show, I'd like to welcome you to Talking Antiques. And this is your host, Paul Purdue, and I have my executive producer, Matt, here. And I have to say to everybody out there that only for Matt, he has really kept me on the straight and narrow and helped me with my programming. And I seem to be getting a little bit better, but I don't think I'm getting better because of me. I think I'm getting better because of Matt. So thank you very much, Matt.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And how are you today?
I'm doing very well.
Do you feel a little bit more secure in your new job?
In my new job, yeah, this is the most secure job I've got.
Oh, great, great.
Producing Talking Antiques.
Great. And I just would like to say a Céad Míle Fáilte to everybody out there, which is Irish for 100,000 welcomes. And I hope you will come and join every show that I do. Be talking a little bit about everything. Could be talking about, I don't know, about the weather one day and call it antique weather.
Should I give the Irish greeting that we were talking about before we came
on
there?
I don't think so. That might be censored. That might be censored.
It's the only one I know.
When everybody gets sort of into the show and start, and we'll throw out the odd one and see does anybody pick it up. We'll have a bit of fun with that.
I like having a secure job.
Okay. Well, the secure job is okay. We'll leave that last one out then. And so before we get really into the show, you are listening to it on 1350 WZGM, which is independent national radio, and you can hear it on the TuneIn app. And I also have it podcasted on my Facebook page, which is Talking Antiques. And, people have been sending me messages. They haven't actually sent one actually out to the Facebook page because they're afraid that maybe that the question might look stupid. And, so it's been sent to me privately. But I don't mind how I get them. And I just thank everybody for, listening and helping me build up my show. Of course, because of that, I need to really thank Village Antiques, because Village Antiques are my sponsors of the show. And, if you're around Biltmore Village, you must go into Village Antiques, talk to David and talk to Terry, and they will definitely help you. And there was a new girl there called Ginger, and she was very helpful to me the last time I was in when I was looking for some stuff. And you will find everything from paintings to furniture to pottery to jewelry, silver, gold, you name it, they have it. So go on into Village Antiques, which is on 755 Biltmore Avenue, Asheville. And they also have a website called villageantiquesonline.com. And just tell them the Irishman sent you. So let's sort of get this little bit of a show on the road. The last show we were talking about, it was a little bit about marquetry, and I was sort of saying that I would bring a little bit back onto it again, and we would talk about it. So people are saying, well, what do you want to be talking about marquetry when you're talking antiques? Well, it's very important to understand that marquetry basically has been involved in furniture from way back to the Egyptians' times. They started it. Nobody really knows where it exactly comes from, but it has been known and has been seen at the tombs out of Egypt, where they used copper saws to cut the wood to about a quarter of an inch, and by doing that, they also shined it and smoothed it down with stones. Sort of like a pumice stone or a stone like that really brought down the edge of it. And the oldest known panel of marquetry known, or the earliest known panel of marquetry known, was made in Germany in about 1863. And apparently it still survives. And it is beautiful. It's sort of like what they call seawood marquetry. And it was on a panel on a big sort of bookcase. It's sort of like the Germans had always went in for big stuff. Probably made out of walnut, probably made out of oak, something like that. And then in sort of like over the next few centuries, marquetry schools were established in France, Germany, and Holland. And of course, during the 16th to the 18th centuries, it got more exquisite, more delicate. A lot of people don't understand that in the old days, when you became, when you became a carpenter, or when you became a cabinet maker, something like that, you had to spend so many years learning your trade. You didn't get paid for it. You had to pay the man to teach you how to do that. But in marquetry, it was a 7-year course. So you go and you learn French polishing. You do your cabinet making, make furniture, whatever. It was 7 years, and then you were allowed to go and be a journeyman and go out and earn your wage. But in marquetry, it was different. Particularly in France, you had to do it for 7 years and then give 3 years free of charge to the man, and then you had to give 10 years of your time before you were accepted to be a marqueterian. And then after that, you might have had 10 years of good life left in your eyes to do marquetry. So marquetry was really an exceptionally difficult skill. It was all done by hand. Nowadays, they do it by laser. And in North Italy was where they started it really doing a lot. They used to have little villages all around where it started one end of the village and somebody would make a table leg or a cupboard or a drawer, and then somebody would cut out the marquetry and it would sort of like a conveyor line, one house to the next, to the next, to the next, till at the end of the street there was your piece of furniture. And that's what they used to do. And in some places they still do that. I don't know, but I won't be held accountable for not being true on that one. But in the old days, that was the way it was done. And then it got into England. And when it got into England, how it got into England was that the Dutch immigrants that came over brought over their marquetry skills, or they were called inlayers rather than marqueterians, and they brought over a style called Dutch marquetry, which was sort of like boxwood or sycamore or chestnut, which is the light-coloured wood, against walnut, mahogany, well, more so walnut. And that's how they got into it. And then it's sort of, the English sort of said, well, this looks good. I think we could make money on this. And the English started getting into it. And some really very, very good marquetries come out of England from the middle of the 1700s all the way up to 1911, where you get the Edwardian period. And then the French really were the killers of marquetry. When you have tortoiseshell and brass inlay, there was Charles Boulle created this particular style of brass, ivory and shell and all of that for the king of France, one of the or two of the kings. And his son was also an absolutely genius doing that. So marquetry has a great, great history. And you can join the Marquetry Society. There's an American Marquetry Society. I think they're based up in Canada. And then, of course, you have the English one. Of course, the English one is they claim to be the best. But, being Irish, I will always go with the American or the Canadian one first before I go with the English one. But I was in it when I was living in Ireland. And it's a great way of learning how to learn about the history of marquetry and understanding what you have to do when you're looking at marquetry and on the way it is put together. And always remember that marquetry is a fine art and an antique in itself. So you're listening to this on 1350 WZGM Independent Nashville Radio. And you can also listen to us on the podcast. You can listen to us on the TuneIn app. And go to my Facebook page, Talking Antiques. And if you have any questions or anything like that, please do not hesitate. And we will come back after the break and we will continue our stories. Welcome back to Talking Antiques, and this is your host Paul Purdue, and Cave Mila Falchi again. Matt is actually playing some Irish music, and if you hear tapping on the floor, that's me. You know, that's just me tapping my foot. Yeah, can't be Irish if you don't tap your feet to good music. Just to recap, on the first part of the show, we talked about marquetry and its influence on furniture, which really, you know, covers about 400 years and is still being done today. And, you know, I also want to thank Village Antiques for being my sponsor. And, of course, you're listening to us on 1350 WZGM, Independent National Radio. And I have a Facebook page called Talking Antiques. Please go on it and tell me what you think about the show and give me your questions. And let's get started and let us do a little bit about clocks. I think I'm going to change to clocks. And somebody said, well, why do you want to talk about clocks? Well, clocks have been around for 500, 600, 700 years. Well, 5 anyway. And, you know, there's so many different clocks. There's so many different clocks around that you could talk about. You know, we have mantle clocks, we have carriage clocks, we have grandfather clocks, we have wag-at-the-wall clocks, cuckoo clocks, we have drone clocks, we have, whatever else clocks do we have? Oh yeah, we have Vienna clocks and multiple types of clocks. And I just sort of thought I would give a little bit about talk a little bit about them today. And you know, one of the stories, you know, this is another story from the old sod. One of the stories was I used to have, I had an antique shop in Dublin, and of course I had one in Carrick-on-Shannon, and I had one in Longford, not all at the same time, but every time I moved around. And I had this person that used to come over from America and buy clocks, and all he did was bought American clocks, and it fascinated him why he had to come to Ireland to buy the clocks. He could get them cheaper than he could buy in America. And he would ask me, why is that? And I didn't know. And of course, every time I moved, he followed. He'd find me. And you know, when times are lean, like in the wintertime, anybody in the antique business knows that January, February are not good months. And he would definitely come over at that time, and it would help my bank balance a bit and pay my rent and feed me. So you know, I'm heavier now than I was then. And it still fascinated him. You know, nobody seemed to know. So I decided I'll do a little bit of research into this. And, you know, nobody knew why there was more American clocks over here. Till I got talking to my grandfather. And my grandfather had a clock. And you were not allowed to touch this clock. It was in the parlour room. And it was an 8-day clock. And every Sunday night at around at 12:25, well, at 11:55, he would wind up this clock. And it was 15 turns of the key. Not 16, not 14, 15. He was very, very meticulous. And he would put the key away where nobody knew, but everybody knew where the key was, but we pretended that we didn't know. And so come Saturday evening, coming up Sunday evening, just before midnight, he would wind up the clock. And that would get him to the next Sunday. He'd wind up the clock again. And it was an American clock. It was a mantle clock. I didn't actually, at the time, I didn't know it was an American clock. I thought it was a marble clock. And it turned out to be simulated marble. It was wood made to look like marble. It had the Corinthian columns on it and the round dial. And he would go in every time and he'd move the hand a fraction just to keep it, look at his pocket watch and keep it going. And I would go in and I'd watch him wind it up. And I said to him, but I was getting older now, and he'd still do it. You know, up to the week before he died, he wound that clock up. That was one of his things. So I said to him, Grandad, I said, where did you get the clock? And he said, well, my mother had the clock, or your great-grandmother had the clock. And it came from her brother that was in America. And I said, okay, that's an interesting story. Why did he send a clock over to America? And he said, well, you do understand that the parlour room was where you brought in all your guests. And one of the most important things to have in a parlour room in Ireland was a clock. So all the people, so the story was that all the people that went to America and started making it, the first thing they sent back, apart from money, was a clock, so that they could put it into the room, bring their neighbours in and show off look at the clock. And it really fascinated me. So I eventually got around to telling my friend, my guy that bought the clock. So I said, well, the reason was that when the famine Irish went over, when they began to get jobs and all, the first thing they did was sent over a clock, and he was fascinated. He was fascinated about that. And I was able to buy these clocks. One of the clocks that I used to love to buy was a Jerome clock. And, they could, OG clocks, which was sort of like a shelf clock. They called them a shelf clock. Put it up, but it'd have two weights on it, and they were either a 30-hour clock or an 8-day clock. And the weights you'd wind it up, and the weights would go down each side of it, and then you'd wind it back up and it'd go up. And very simple. And when they were made, when they were made in the 1800s and so forth, they cost about $7 a pop. And then the next year, the guy was so good at selling them that they went down to $4.50. And he made clocks that were selling for 75 cents a piece. He was made millions of them. But his invention on these clocks was that up until that time, the brass mechanics were casted, and he came up with a procedure to metal press the parts out, which made them longer lasting. And these clocks are still going around over 100, 150 years ago. They were never designed to last that long, which shows what the great innovation of American clock. This guy ended up, like some of the people that we talked about, ended up penniless at the end. He died a pauper because he bought a clock company by a man called J.B. Burnham, I think it was. And the clock, that company was going into trouble, and the next minute, bang, he lost everything. But he came up with some great ideas and some great things that are still in the mechanics, in the brass movements of clocks today, are still used. And like the open escapement and the thing. But we'll get into that more in the next couple of shows, because that's more technical stuff. Of course, and some of the shows that we'll be doing in the future will be about restoration, about how to protect your clocks, what you do. Also about what to do with your furniture, if you have antique furniture. What to do with your paintings, how to keep your paintings clean. And I'll throw out a little teaser while we're waiting here. How do you clean an aisle painting, Matt, instead of sending it to somebody that really does it professionally?
I'm thinking not Windex on a washcloth.
No, but an onion or a potato.
Really?
Yeah. And if you cut the onion in half and just go over your aisle painting with it, you will be amazed how much dirt you will take off with an onion. And so we will talk about that again. That's just a little teaser now for a couple of shows down the road. I have to really concentrate, make sure I get them right and give out the right information so that people don't destroy anything. And, we are talking about this on 1350 WZGM, Independent National Radio. And we're, on the Facebook page. I'd like to just thank Village Antiques for being my sponsor again for this show. And only for them, we would not be up and running, and Matt wouldn't have that permanent job he's talking about. So listen to us on Talking Antiques. On Talking Antiques on the radio. Talk to us about it on the Facebook page. Listen to us on the podcast. And we will definitely look forward to seeing you at the next show. So when you're out there, happy hunting, happy treasure hunting. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next show. Bye.